Now on BBC News, the latest from New York and around the world. Business Today.
Live from New York at the opening bell, this is Business Today, where market sell-off is intensifying as fears about overvaluation of tech stocks and hawkish comments from Fed officials are keeping investors nervous. Peeling back some tariffs, the Trump administration announces the easing of levies on coffee and bananas with Latin American countries in an effort to address concerns over affordability for U.S. consumers. Also on the show, a big budget U-turn in the UK as the Chancellor scraps plans to raise income tax at the upcoming budget, causing government borrowing costs to rise. And
my name is Michael Caine.
Well, if you can't beat them, join them. Why more celebrities are licensing their voices to AI companies in what could be a turning point for the industry and its fractious relationship with Hollywood. Hello and welcome to Business Today, live from New York. I'm Erin Delmore. The stock sell-off is gathering pace. All indexes are opening in the red again following the worst day in more than a month on Wall Street on Thursday. Investors continue to worry that tech companies, which have soared this year on excitement about the AI revolution, are overvalued. And investors are also concerned about the state of the U.S. economy amid hawkish comments from Federal Reserve officials, which are adding doubts about an interest rate cut in December. Fed speakers on Thursday indicated that caution over rate cuts would help ease sticky inflation. So to discuss, I'm joined now by Michael Gayed, portfolio manager at the Free Markets ETF. So, Michael, how concerned are you about the pressure that we're seeing around AI stocks?
Well, I think it's a long time coming. I think what's interesting here is that you're seeing concerns not necessarily around just valuation, but maybe some credit, given some of these moves in the credit default swap market and the bonds of some of these large cap tech, Mag 7 type of names. Look, it's only been a day or two, right, that we've seen this kind of a sell-off. There's clearly a notable rotation into healthcare. That's something I've been saying I think would be coming for a while. But I do think it's important to note that a rotation to healthcare isn't necessarily a positive thing. And I say that purely because healthcare's outperformance tends to be very correlated to defensive sector movement, like what you see in consumer staples and utilities. So I'd be more concerned if you see a sustained rotation into healthcare, which coincides with other defensive outperformance. For now, I think this is more just, let's call it a hiccup. Seasonality still favors the stock market. But let's face it, it's been a weird year, and seasonality hasn't worked, so maybe it's not going to work this time either.
Yeah, interesting points you make there. We'll definitely keep watching. Let's look now at the Fed. Bets on a rate cut in December are about 50-50 at the moment. Which side are you on?
Tell me where the S&P is, and I'll tell you which side I'm on. I think that's the key point. Look, I mean, if the stock market keeps dropping, you're going to have a reverse wealth effect, and those odds are going to favor more a cut. I think that's the reality. And that's a very likely scenario, I will say. I think if the market is more concerned about the Fed changing its mind on interest rate cuts, then the market is going to try to force the Fed to get its way, right? Which, again, will go back to declining stocks and then that rally into end of year. But the reality is inflation is sticky. It's not clear to me why they lowered rates to begin with when credit spreads are as tight as they are, unless they see something that nobody else is seeing in terms of stress. Financial conditions are still very loose. And the fact that small caps, I will say the most concerning aspect of that, though, is that the fact that small caps still are not really showing sustained outperformance and momentum, which small caps are very sensitive to interest rate policy, obviously. I think that's, if you're going to make a real bear case, it's that small caps are still sending a warning that something is very off in terms of monetary policy transmission to that which is the most tied to the U.S. consumer.
All right, Michael Gayed, we'll have to leave it there. Thank you very much.
Appreciate it.
Now, some breaking news just in. Switzerland has said they've reached an agreement with the U.S. to lower import tariffs from 39% to 15%. We'll bring you more on this as we have it. Now we're going to return to that issue of sticky inflation in the U.S. One knock-on effect from the U.S. government shutdown is that inflation data for the world's biggest economy in October might never be published. But that doesn't mean the White House isn't concerned about the impact of rising prices. It's announced a framework for trade agreements with 4 Latin American countries. It says that will cut tariffs on imports of coffee, cocoa, and bananas. More details of the agreements with Argentina, Guatemala, El Salvador, and Ecuador are set to be published by the end of this month, but they should give American exporters greater access to those markets. So to unpack this, we have Erica York, an expert on U.S. federal taxes at the Washington think tank, the Tax Foundation, which describes itself as nonpartisan. Erica, it's good to see you again. Can you run us through what's changed and how big of an impact it'll have?
We'll have to wait for the official announcements and details to come out to measure how big of an impact this will have. But the US trade rep has referred to these as micro areas of trade. So that gives us an idea that this is not going to be macroeconomically substantial. These are not even within the US's top 10 trade partners, and it will only be a small sliver of imports that see relief from these tariffs. So in terms of what we should expect for the overall burden on American taxpayers, the overall increases in retail prices we see from tariffs, it will be pretty contained to these key foodstuffs products rather than something really breaking.
Erica, we're seeing concern from the Trump administration around price pressures. And let's look at the timing. It comes right after Democrats were elected in key elections around the country where that was exactly the defining issue. So 2 questions for you. How impactful are tariffs on the cost of living here in the U.S., and how responsive do you think the Trump administration is to public pressure?
I think tariffs are very impactful. We've estimated at Tax Foundation that they amount to an average tax burden of $1,300 this year. That will rise to $1,600 next year. So whether that's through price increases or through income reductions because firms see costs go up, tariffs do not help with affordability. And that's unfortunate because tariffs are one of the signature policies of the Trump administration. I don't think we will see a substantial walkback of tariffs from the Trump administration, even if that economic pain gets greater, just because of how dug in the president is on tariffs being his main tool that he uses for all sorts of policy prescriptions.
Erica, we're getting into the holiday shopping season over here. And amid all this, there's also uncertainty around how tariffs unfold, and that's to do with the big court case on the validity of tariffs. So what does the uncertainty do to the economy more broadly and also to businesses and consumers that are trying to work out when to make those big purchases?
Uncertainty has a chilling effect. So it will cause businesses to pause on big decisions. We've even heard anecdotally companies say that they're taking a wait and see approach to tariffs because they don't know how durable the tariff policy will be. That said, though, if you are bringing in inventory for the holiday shopping season and you are forking over 10%, 15%, 25% tariff on the value of those goods, we are likely to see that impact retail prices for consumers. It's just a matter of how much rather than will it impact those prices at all.
All right, Erica York, always a privilege to have you on our air. Thank you.
Thank you.
In the UK, the government's indicated it will not raise income tax rates after all in this month's budget. Recently, the Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, has hinted she would have to put up income tax, even though that would have broken Labour's manifesto promises. But now it's understood she's had a change of heart because new economic data shows that a black hole in public finances is smaller than had been feared. The news had an immediate effect on UK government bonds, prompting a sharp sell-off. The 10-year gilt yield saw the biggest daily jump since July, and the pound fell against the dollar. Gilts have eased slightly, and the pound has since recovered some ground. Jane Foley is head of FX strategy at Rabobank, and she told us more about the market reaction to the change in direction on tax rises.
Last week, of course, we had that unusually timed speech, and the market took that as an indication that the Labour government was going to break that election pledge and raise income taxes. Now, that settled the market. That pleased the market because we all know that the government will have this large fiscal hole. And how is she going to close that? Well, she could cut spending, but Labour MPs aren't keen on that. She could raise taxes, which, of course, would annoy the electorate, but that seemed like the way to go. Or she could increase the country's debt, which is, of course, already at a very high level, about 95% of GDP. And that would not please the bond market. Now, last week, it seemed as if the bond market had the upper hand and she wasn't going to do that. And this morning, there were those doubts. However, having really annoyed the market first thing this morning, then we had the headlines that the reason that the Chancellor may not have to hike income tax is because the growth estimates, the growth forecasts were improved. Now that has settled down some of those concerns in the market. Sterling is off the lows, the gilt market is off the lows. But there is a legacy to the news we had this morning. There's an impact on the Chancellor's reputation. What can the market trust? What is going to come out? So the market is likely to be a little bit spooked going into that budget on November the 26th.
Finally, to one of the most famous voices in the world.
My name is Michael Caine. You know, I've played many roles in my life, both on and off the screen. But now, I've got a question for you. What makes a voice iconic?
That was part of a commercial for AI company 11 Labs. Acting legend Sir Michael Caine is one of the high-profile names to license his voice to 11 Labs, which this week launched a marketplace for voices for use by brands and businesses. It includes the voices of dead Hollywood stars like John Wayne and Judy Garland, as well as historical figures from J. Robert Oppenheimer to Maya Angelou and Alan Turing. We asked Lisa Martin, tech analyst and former NASA scientist, how much of a game changer this is.
You know, we're seeing not just the game changing, but we're seeing voices like Michael Caine. They're licensed voices used for a whole bunch of AI-powered experiences. This is both in entertainment and business. I think we're going to see three major use cases here. The first one is entertainment and media. That's going to include things like AI-narrated audiobooks and podcasts, virtual cameos in movies, video games. Imagine chatting with Michael Caine, for example. The second use case is brand and marketing campaigns. So like you were mentioning, brands can use this. Imagine personalized endorsements or virtual spokespeople roles that can scale globally, or campaigns that are localized to use the same celebrity voice in multiple languages. The third use case is something we're already seeing, and that's voice assistants and apps where we could have custom celebrity voices for navigation systems in our cars, in car assistants, our smart speakers. We could also even see fitness, meditation, or education apps using familiar voices to really drive that feel-good connection and deeper audience engagement.
In other news, Walmart's getting a new boss. The world's biggest retailer says CEO Doug McMillon will retire at the end of January after 11 years in the role. He'll be succeeded by John Furner, who runs the U.S. operation. One of his biggest challenges will be navigating President Trump's tariffs, which have already led to some price increases and are putting pressure on profit margins at retailers across the U.S. And Jaguar Land Rover has announced it's made a loss of almost £500 million in the 3 months to the end of September, brought down by the massive cyber attack on the car company. The attack at the end of August forced JLR to shut down its computer networks, leaving it unable to operate its highly automated production lines throughout September and into early October. That's all for us on Business Today. Thank you so much for watching. Stay with us here on BBC News.